This happened on New Year's Eve, 2021. I was 20 years old, broke, exhausted, and doing DoorDash because my regular job had quietly cut my hours until I barely had any left. I needed money badly enough that I didn't care what day it was. Holidays, weekends, it didn't matter. Rent doesn't care about celebrations. People always say New Year's Eve is good for deliveries. Bigger tips, fewer drivers. Everyone drunk, lazy, and willing to pay extra to stay indoors. What no one tells you is how quiet the world gets that night. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in when everyone is hiding inside, watching the clock, waiting for the year to end. It's not peaceful, it's hollow, like the streets are holding their breath. I live in a small town surrounded by dense, state-protected woodland, the kind of place where civilization ends abruptly. You drive 5 minutes past the last gas station, and suddenly you're swallowed by unlit back roads, gravel lanes, and trees packed so tightly together, your high beams barely make a dent. That night was bitterly cold. Snow from earlier in the week had frozen into hard, uneven patches along the road. Around 10:30 p.m., I was sitting in my 2012 Honda Civic heater, blasting full force, rubbing my hands together to feel something again. That's when my phone buzzed. Peak pay, plus $5. Then another vibration, a new order. The restaurant was an upscale Italian place, the kind I usually avoided because parking was always a nightmare. But this order was massive. Multiple trays of lasagna, appetizers, bread, and 3 bottles of sparkling cider. Almost $200 worth of food. Then I saw the tip. $30 already included. Below it in the delivery instructions was a message. Cash bonus under the mat if you follow instructions. Please do not ring the bell. Come to the back porch. Door is unlocked. Leave food on the kitchen table. We are in the basement celebrating. My stomach did a small, tight flip. Normally, anything involving come inside is an automatic no for delivery drivers. It's drilled into, you take the picture, leave the food, get out. But $30 up front plus cash bonus, I was behind on rent. Every bad decision I made that winter was wrapped in that fact. I told myself it was a party. Rich people in big houses get weird about service workers. They forget boundaries exist. So I accepted the order. The restaurant was chaos. People in suits and sequin dresses packed shoulder to shoulder, champagne corks popping somewhere in the back. Everyone looked warm, loud, alive. I stood there in a grease-stained hoodie, hauling 3 heavy thermal bags, feeling completely out of place. As I walked back to my car, I called my friend Marcus. Marcus is the skeptic in our friend group, the guy who watches too many true crime documentaries and narrates everything like it's already evidence. Hey, I said, setting the phone on my dashboard. I'm heading out to this place called the Gables. They want me to go inside and leave the food on their kitchen table. There was no hesitation. Don't, Marcus said. Absolutely don't. I laughed. Relax. It's New Year's. They're probably drunk and don't want to walk upstairs. That's how every missing person story starts, he replied. That, and it seemed normal at the time. It's a $30 tip, I said. Plus cash. A pause. Okay, that's suspicious, Marcus admitted. Just stay on the phone with me when you get there. I'll call you back, I said. Signal's probably garbage out there. The drive took about 20 minutes. The farther I got from town, the more the New Year's atmosphere vanished. No fireworks, no music, no other cars. Just the steady hum of tires on asphalt and trees leaning in from both sides of the road. Eventually, the GPS told me to turn. I slowed when I saw the gates. Tall, rusted iron gates standing wide open like an invitation or a mouth. Beyond them stretched a long, narrow private road. I drove through, and the gates vanished in my rearview mirror with a strange sense of finality I couldn't quite explain. The house at the end was enormous. A 3-story Victorian, tall and narrow with peeling paint and sharp angles. Beautiful in the way abandoned places sometimes are. Most of the windows were dark, but down near the ground, basement windows glowed with a warm, flickering light like candles. I parked and turned off the engine. The silence hit instantly. No wind, no music, no laughter. I grabbed the bags and stepped out. My breath fogged the air. I walked to the front porch looking for the mat mentioned in the instructions. There wasn't one, just bare stone. I checked the app again. My phone showed 1 bar of service. I walked around the side of the house. The frozen grass crunched loudly under my boots, each step sounding too big, too intrusive. As I reached the backyard, something bothered me. There were no footprints in the snow. No signs of guests arriving. No tire tracks. No cigarette butts. For a basement celebration, the house felt profoundly empty. The back porch wrapped around the rear of the house. As I climbed the steps, the wood creaked in long, aching groans. The back door was oak-heavy with a glass pane. Inside, I could see the kitchen, modern, expensive. Marble counters, stainless steel appliances, one light glowing above the stove. I tried the handle. It opened. "Hello," I called. "DoorDash." My voice vanished into the house. The air inside was oppressively warm, like the heat had been cranked up too high. The smell hit next old wood, mixed with something sweet and rotten like flowers left out too long. I carried the food to the massive kitchen table and began unloading. That's when I noticed the place setting. One plate, one fork, one knife, and in the center of the plate, a Polaroid photo. I picked it up. It was my car. Me inside it, sitting at a red light. The timestamp read 20 minutes ago. My heart dropped. Someone had followed me. From the basement doorway, I heard a slow, steady sound. A knife being sharpened. Then a woman's voice floated up the stairs, calm and hollow. "You're late," she said softly. "We've been waiting to start the countdown." I turned toward the door, and in the reflection of the dark kitchen window, I saw a man standing behind me, tall, motionless, wearing an old-fashioned tuxedo and a smooth white porcelain mask with no mouth. On a silver tray in his hands was my phone. For a split second, none of us moved. The man in the porcelain mask stood perfectly still, his posture rigid and formal like a butler waiting to be addressed. The silver tray in his hands was held at chest height, my phone resting on it as neatly as a dessert spoon. The screen was dark, no cracks, no smudges. He had taken it without me ever feeling a thing. "It's rude to be on your phone at a dinner party," he said at last. His voice was dry, papery, like it had been scraped out of his throat. We thought it best to remove the distraction. Behind me, the basement door opened wider. A woman stepped into the kitchen light. She was dressed for a gala. A floor-length, sequined gown that caught the light and fractured it into glittering shards across the walls. Her hair was sculpted into careful waves. Everything about her looked expensive, carefully curated, except her face. She wasn't wearing a mask. She didn't need one. Her skin was pulled tight, too tight, stretched by so much cosmetic work that her smile looked frozen halfway between pleasant and feral. In her right hand, she held a long, thin carving knife. She didn't look at me. She looked at the lasagna trays. "The food is still warm," she said, sounding pleased. How thoughtful. We so rarely get the timing right. "I'm leaving," I said. My voice came out thin, unsteady. I lifted one of the thermal bags, gripping it by the handle like a club. "The food's here. You have it. Just let me go." The man in the mask took a single step forward. The floorboards didn't creak under him. He moved lightly, deliberately. "But the countdown," he said. "It's almost midnight. You can't leave before the resolution." That word echoed in my head. Resolution. Something inside me finally snapped, free of shock. I swung the thermal bag with everything I had. The corner of it slammed into the side of the man's head with a heavy, wet thud. He staggered the tray, clanging as it hit the floor. My phone slid across the hardwood and vanished beneath the kitchen island. I didn't think. I ran. I bolted past the woman, ignoring her shrill gasp, and tore through the house toward the front door. The foyer was vast and freezing, the sudden cold shocking against my skin. I grabbed the handle and pulled. Nothing. I slammed my weight into it. Still nothing. I glanced through the narrow window beside the door and felt my stomach drop. A heavy chain had been wrapped around the handles from the outside, looped and locked in place. They hadn't invited me in. They'd sealed me inside. "The front door is for guests who are leaving," the woman called from somewhere behind me. Her heels clicked slowly against the floor. Click. Click. "And you haven't even had dessert." I ran up the stairs. The carpet was thick and plush, swallowing the sound of my footsteps as I scrambled upward. At the landing, I threw myself into the first room I saw and slammed the door shut, twisting the lock hard enough to hurt my wrist. It was a bedroom, or what had once been one. All the furniture was draped in white sheets, lumpy and still like corpses laid out for viewing. I ran to the window and yanked the curtains open. Thick steel bars were bolted directly into the stone frame. My heart sank. I looked down into the yard. My Civic sat in the driveway, engine still idling, headlights casting 2 weak cones of light into the trees. Then I saw the mounds. Dozens of small, rounded shapes covered in snow, arranged in neat rows. At the head of each one sat a familiar red and white DoorDash bag weighed down with a rock. My knees nearly gave out. This wasn't a one-time thing. A soft knock sounded at the door. 10 minutes to midnight, the masked man said calmly. The resolution is simple. Out with the old. In with the new. I grabbed the heaviest thing within reach, a brass lamp, and ripped the cord from the wall. I've called the police, I shouted. My friend knows where I am. Silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a phone began to ring. My phone. Is this Marcus? The man asked casually. I heard him answer it. Yes. He's having a wonderful time. He'll be home soon. Happy New Year. The lock turned. They had a key. I didn't hide. As the door opened, I charged straight for the gap. I hurled the lamp at the man's mask. He flinched just enough. I shoved past him, crashing into the sheet-covered furniture, and barreled down the stairs. I slipped halfway down, twisting my ankle in a burst of white-hot pain, but adrenaline carried me the rest of the way. I ran for the kitchen. The woman was waiting there, knife raised, eyes wide with excitement. 5 minutes, she shrieked. I grabbed a bottle of the sparkling cider and smashed it against the counter. Glass exploded outward. I lunged not with the bottle, but with a tray of lasagna, flipping it upward and dumping scalding hot sauce directly into her face. She screamed, dropping the knife. I kicked the back door open and ran. Not to my car, into the woods. Branches tore at my skin. Ice burned my lungs. I ran until I couldn't hear the house anymore. I hid inside a hollowed-out log, shivering violently, watching the sky begin to pale. At midnight, I didn't hear fireworks. I heard a long, mournful whistle drifting from the direction of the house. When morning came, I found a road. A trucker stopped. The police investigated. They found the house, empty, abandoned. No furniture, no kitchen, no trays. But in the backyard, sitting alone in the weeds, was my phone. On a silver tray. At exactly 12:00 a.m., an unread message waited on the screen. Thank you for the meal. We'll see you next year for the second course. I quit DoorDash that day. I moved 2 states away a month later, and every New Year's Eve I lock myself inside a hotel room with no windows, no deliveries, and my phone turned off. Because I know someone out there is still waiting, and they still have my number. Most people view New Year's Eve as a threshold, a clean slate where the mistakes of the past 12 months are magically wiped away at the stroke of midnight. But if there's one thing I learned in the winter of 2018, it's that the past doesn't care about a calendar. It doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it follows you into the woods. I was 24 living in Seattle, and I was burnt out. I'd spent the year working 60-hour weeks at a tech startup, and by December, my nerves were frayed. My best friend Ben and his girlfriend Chloe suggested we do something different for New Year's. No clubs, no crowded bars, no overpriced champagne. Instead, they'd found a secluded masterpiece on a rental site, a glass and timber cabin deep in the Olympic Peninsula, miles away from the nearest neighbor. It's a digital detox. Chloe had pitched it, her eyes bright with the kind of forced optimism that always made me nervous. We turn off our phones, we bring some whiskey, we hike, and we start 2019 with a clear head. Just the 3 of us. Ben, the ultimate skeptic, had laughed. More like just the 3 of us freezing our butts off in the middle of nowhere. But hey, at least there won't be any fireworks to keep me awake. We arrived on December 30th. The cabin was beautiful, but it had an odd energy. It was one of those modern architectural marvels, huge floor-to-ceiling windows on all sides, designed to make you feel like you were part of the forest. The problem with being part of the forest at night is that you feel incredibly exposed. When the sun goes down, those windows turn into black mirrors. You can't see out, but anyone or anything out there can see perfectly in. The first night was fine. We drank, played cards, and stayed up late laughing. But on the morning of New Year's Eve, the atmosphere shifted. It started with the time capsule. The owner of the cabin had left a note on the kitchen island, a New Year's tradition. Under the floorboard in the master loft, there is a small metal box. Feel free to read the resolutions of those who stayed here before you and leave your own for the next guests. That's actually kind of cool, Chloe said, already heading for the stairs. We followed her up to the loft. The floorboard was easy to find. It was marked with a small carved star. Ben pried it up, revealing a weathered copper box. We sat in a circle on the rug, the gray morning light filtering through the trees outside. Chloe pulled out a handful of scraps of paper. Some were dated 2015-2016. Standard stuff. I want to be kinder. I will quit smoking. I hope to find love. Then Ben pulled out a piece of paper that looked different. It wasn't a scrap. It was a page torn from a ledger. It was dated the 31st of December, 2017. Exactly 1 year ago. The handwriting was erratic, the ink smudged as if the person's hand had been shaking. "He is in the rafters," Ben read aloud. His voice lost its joking edge. "He doesn't want the year to end. He says the transition is the weakest point. If you hear the clicking, don't look up. If you look up, you're part of his resolution." There was a long silence. Chloe gave a forced laugh. Okay, someone was definitely trying to be edgy. A little New Year's prank for the next guests. Probably, I said, but I couldn't help looking up. The cabin had massive exposed cedar beams that crisscrossed the high ceiling. They were thick, dark, and cast long shadows against the roof. Totally a prank. Ben agreed, though he tucked the note back into the box a little too quickly. "Let's go for that hike. I need some air." We spent the day outdoors, trying to shake the weird vibe, but the forest felt oppressive. The Pacific Northwest in late December is a world of gray, brown, and damp green. Every time the wind caught the branches, it sounded like a heavy sigh. We didn't talk about the note, but I noticed Ben looking back toward the cabin every few minutes. We returned around 4:00 p.m. as the light began to fail. As we walked up the porch, I stopped. "Did we leave the front door open?" I asked. The door was ajar by about 2 inches. I distinctly remembered Ben locking it. Wind Chloe suggested her voice an octave higher than usual. She was the overreactor of the group, and I could see the panic starting to bloom in her cheeks. "The wind doesn't turn a deadbolt, Chloe," Ben said grimly. He pushed the door open. The cabin was silent. Everything looked exactly as we had left it. The whiskey bottle was on the table, the cards were scattered, but as I walked into the kitchen to start dinner, I felt a draft. I looked toward the back of the house. The sliding glass door that led to the deck was wide open, and there, sitting right in the center of the kitchen island, was something that hadn't been there before. It was a small, hand-carved wooden figure. It was crude, shaped like a person, but with elongated limbs and no face. It was soaking wet as if it had been sitting in the creek behind the house, and it was dripping onto the marble countertop. Then I called out, my heart starting to thud. "Come look at this." They walked over and Chloe let out a small sob. "We need to leave. Right now. This isn't a joke. It's 5:00 p.m. on New Year's Eve," Ben said, though he looked pale. "The roads are icy and we're 3 hours from the city. If we leave now, we're driving through the mountains in total darkness during the busiest drunk driving night of the year." "I don't care," Chloe snapped. "Someone was in here. Someone is still in here, maybe." We searched the house. Every closet, under every bed, the crawl space. Nothing. We were alone. Or at least the house was empty. Ben eventually convinced Chloe to stay, arguing that we were safer inside with the doors locked and the fire going than we were on the mountain roads. We decided to hunker down. We moved the sofas so they faced the windows and each other. We turned on every single light in the house. But as the sun disappeared completely, the mirror effect of the windows became absolute. We were sitting in a brilliantly lit box, surrounded by a black void. Around 9:00 p.m., the clicking started. It was faint at first. A rhythmic click. 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 Like fingernails tapping on hard wood. "Is that the heater?" Chloe whispered. She was huddled under a blanket, clutching a steak knife she'd taken from the kitchen. "It's just the house settling," Ben said. He was the skeptic, the one who always had a logical explanation. But I saw him, staring at the ceiling. The wood expands and contracts with the temperature change. Click. 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 The sound wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from above us. I looked up at the rafters. In the bright light of the living room, the beams looked solid, but there were pockets of darkness where the beams met the roof, triangles of shadow that the light couldn't quite reach. "Guys," I said, my voice trembling. The note said, "If you hear the clicking, don't look up." "Stop it, Elias," Ben hissed. "You're feeding into her panic. It's just a sound." Then a drop of something hit the coffee table. It was dark, thick, and smelled metallic. It landed right in the middle of a deck of cards. I looked at the spot on the table, then I looked at Ben. His eyes were wide, fixed on the ceiling. He wasn't the skeptic anymore. He was terrified. "Ben," I whispered. "Don't look up." But Ben was already looking. He was staring into the deep shadow of the main support beam, about 20 feet above our heads. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Slowly, very slowly, a hand began to reach down from the shadow. It was pale, impossibly long, and the fingers moved with a jerky, multi-jointed motion like the legs of a spider. And then the clicking started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the wood. It was coming from the thing's throat. The scream that left Chloe's throat was primal. It was the kind of sound that doesn't just grate on your ears, it vibrates in your bones. The hand above us stiffened. The long, pale fingers curled into a fist, and then with a speed that defied the laws of anatomy, the rest of the figure swung down from the rafters. It wasn't a monster, it was a man. But man feels like the wrong word for the skeletal, gray-skinned thing that landed on the coffee table, scattering the deck of cards like confetti. He was wearing a tattered, filth-stained tuxedo jacket and a plastic Happy New Year headband that sat crookedly on his matted, greasy hair. His eyes were wide, the whites showing all the way around the pupils, and he was grinning, a wide, toothy smile that didn't reach his eyes. The clicking wasn't a biological sound. He was snapping his teeth together over and over with mechanical precision. Click, click. Click, click. Ben, the skeptic, the man who always had a logical answer, didn't move. He sat frozen on the sofa, his face inches away from the intruder. "Happy New Year," the man croaked. His voice sounded like it was being dragged through gravel. "Ben, move," I yelled, lunging forward and grabbing Ben by the shoulder, yanking him backward just as the man's hand lashed out. Those long, yellowed fingernails tore a strip of fabric right out of Ben's sweater. "Out, get out," Chloe shrieked, scrambling toward the front door. But the man didn't follow us. He stayed on the table, crouched like a gargoyle. He reached out and grabbed the whiskey bottle we'd been drinking from. He didn't drink it, he just poured the amber liquid over his own head, his eyes never leaving ours. "The resolution," he whispered, the clicking of his teeth intensifying. "The old must be burned away. The transition is the weakest point." Suddenly, the lights flickered. The brilliant, warm glow of the cabin began to pulse. Each time the lights went dark, the man was in a different position. Darkness, light. He was standing on the floor. Darkness, light. He was inches from Chloe. Darkness, light. He was crouching on the back of the sofa. The mirror effect of the windows was gone. Now the darkness of the forest was inside with us. The power Ben finally found his voice. "The generator is outside. He's messed with the lines. I don't care about the lines," I shouted, grabbing the heavy iron fire poker from the hearth. "We're leaving now." We scrambled for the front door, but as I reached for the handle, I saw something that made my blood turn to slush. Outside, in the pitch-black night, dozens of tiny flickering lights were appearing in the trees. At first, I thought they were fireflies, but it was December. They weren't fireflies. They were lighters. Small blue and orange flames were being flicked on in a wide semicircle around the cabin. There wasn't just one person in the rafters. There was a whole group of them out there waiting in the cold. "They're surrounding us," Chloe sobbed her back against the door. "Oh God, they're everywhere." The man inside the house let out a high-pitched, warbling whistle. The lights in the trees began to move toward the house. "The sliding door," I yelled, remembering the one we'd found open. We sprinted toward the back of the cabin. The man in the tuxedo jacket didn't try to stop us. He just watched us with that hideous fixed grin, his teeth clicking a frantic rhythm. He seemed to be enjoying the chase. We burst through the sliding glass door and out onto the deck. The air was freezing, biting into our skin. We didn't head for the driveway. We knew they'd be waiting there. Instead, we leapt off the side of the deck, plunging into the thick, thorny underbrush of the ravine. We ran blindly through the woods, branches whipping our faces. Behind us, I could hear the sound of the cabin's windows shattering, massive, expensive panes of glass exploding as the people from the woods entered the house. And then a different sound rose up. They were singing. It wasn't a song I recognized. It was a dissonant, toneless chant that rose and fell with the wind. Out with the old, out with the soul, let the new year take its toll. We didn't stop until we reached the main road nearly 2 miles away. We stood there, 3 shivering, broken people, until a snowplow driver found us at 3:00 a.m. When the police eventually went to the cabin, the scene was bizarre. There was no signs of a struggle. No blood, no stolen property. In fact, the cabin was spotless. The glass had been replaced, brand new panes had been installed overnight. The copper box in the loft was gone. The police treated us like we were the ones who had lost it. They found the time capsule box in the woods a few days later empty. They told us it was likely a group of local squatters, or a cult that used the remote rentals for their rituals, but without evidence of a crime, there wasn't much they could do. But here is the thing that haunts me. 2 weeks after we got back to Seattle, I was folding my laundry. I reached into the pocket of the hoodie I'd been wearing that night, the one I'd been wearing when I ran through the woods. Inside, I found a small, hand-carved wooden figure. It was identical to the one we'd seen on the kitchen island. But this one was different. It had a face. Someone had carved a very specific, very detailed face into the wood. It was my face. And on the back of the figure in smudged ink were the words, Resolution Elias. See you in 2025. I looked at the calendar. It was 2019. I thought I had years, but every New Year's since then I feel a little more like the old that needs to be burned away. I've moved 4 times. I don't tell anyone where I live, but every time I hear a floorboard creak or a heater click in the night, I look at the ceiling, because I know the transition is the weakest point, and 2025 is just around the corner. This happened on New Year's Eve of 2023. At the time, I was 26 years old, working as a freelance architectural photographer, which is a polite way of saying I was constantly worried about money. Jobs came in waves, months of nothing, followed by frantic stretches where I said yes to everything because I didn't know when the next paycheck would come. So when a former client reached out and offered me $1,000 just to house sit over the holidays, I didn't hesitate. His name was Mr. Sterling. A wealthy developer, the kind of man who spoke in calm, confident sentences and never asked about price, only availability. He owned a showpiece property about 40 miles outside of Chicago, perched on a ridge in a gated community that overlooked a frozen lake. He was flying to the Maldives for New Year's and didn't want to leave the house empty. I just need someone there, he told me over the phone. Insurance requirement. Pipes, electronics, that sort of thing. It's all automated anyway. You're basically a warm body. $1,000. 4 days. No real work. I said yes before he finished the sentence. The house was almost entirely glass, walls, corners, even parts of the ceiling. Steel beams and concrete floors held it all together, but the dominant feeling was transparency, like the house didn't want to hide anything. It's a smart home, Leo Sterling told me. The Aegis system handles everything. Climate locks, lighting, privacy glass. You don't need to touch a thing. Help yourself to the bar. I arrived on December 30th. The place was stunning, coldly beautiful. White marble floors, gray rugs that looked too expensive to walk on, and floor-to-ceiling windows that wrapped around every room. The lake below was frozen solid, a vast sheet of dull silver, reflecting the winter sky. There were no curtains, only privacy glass, which could turn opaque with a command. Standing inside that house felt like standing on a stage. I felt rich just being there. Powerful. Isolated. I called my girlfriend Sarah and gave her a tour over FaceTime. She worked double shifts at a hospital and couldn't come out with me. I don't like it, she said almost immediately. When I laughed, it's incredible. It looks like a fishbowl, she said. You're sitting in a glass house on a hill. Anyone could see you. There's no one out here, I said, turning the camera toward the lake and the woods. Nearest house is half a mile away. Plus, the Aegis system would light this place up if a squirrel sneezed. Just keep the glass opaque at night, she said. For me. I loved the way moonlight spilled across the snow and turned the house into a reflection of the night sky. By 8:00 p.m. on New Year's Eve, the wind had picked up. It howled against the steel frame, making the house groan softly like it was breathing. I sat in the great room with a glass of expensive scotch, watching a movie on a screen that descended from the ceiling. That's when the first glitch happened. A soft chime echoed through the house. The movie paused. I looked toward the kitchen island, where the Aegis system hub, a sleek black tablet, lit up. Guests detected at perimeter gate. The screen showed the iron gates at the bottom of the long driveway. Snow whipped through the floodlights, but the road was empty. No car. No person. Wind, I muttered. 10 minutes later, the chime rang again. Guests detected at front porch. My heart skipped. I pulled up the porch camera. Empty concrete steps. A potted plant rattling in the wind. Unease crept in, slow and uncomfortable. I called my friend Dave, a software engineer, the calm one. "It's the weather," Dave said over the noise of a party. "Snow and wind mess with infrared sensors. Turn the sensitivity down and enjoy your night." So I did. And then I took Sarah's advice. I tapped the command to turn the glass opaque. One by one, the walls clouded over, sealing me inside a milky white shell. The house felt smaller. Safer. At least for a while. Around 11:00 p.m., another chime sounded sharper this time. Internal motion detected Master Suite, the room directly above me. I hadn't been upstairs all night. I opened the camera feed. The bedroom appeared in grainy green night vision. Empty, perfectly still. Then a small red dot appeared on the wall. A laser point. It moved slowly, deliberately, and then stopped, aimed directly at the camera. My tablet vibrated. New guest authorized. My blood went cold. "I didn't authorize anyone," I whispered. The system didn't respond. Names began scrolling. Guest 1. Authorized. Guest 2. Authorized. Guest 3. Authorized. The chime rang again and again. Front door unlocked. Back door unlocked. Garage entry unlocked. I heard the heavy electronic bolts slide back in perfect unison. I grabbed the biggest knife from the kitchen drawer and backed into the corner as the lights dimmed, slowly fading into a deep, ominous red. Then, the screen changed. A countdown appeared. 001422. 14 minutes to midnight. Beneath it, a message scrolled. "The party is about to begin. Please take your seat at the table." For a moment, I couldn't move. 14 minutes sounded like a long time. When you're standing alone in a glass house that's just unlocked itself for something you didn't invite, 14 minutes feels like a countdown to execution. I bolted for the front door. The tablet had said unlocked, but when I wrapped my hand around the steel handle and pulled, it didn't move an inch. The keypad beside it glowed a steady, defiant red. I tried again, harder, slamming my shoulder into it. Nothing. I ran to the back door. Same result. Then the garage. The sectional door refused to budge, and when I looked up, I felt a wave of helpless nausea roll through me. The red emergency release cord, the last manual option, had been cleanly cut. The house wasn't open. It was sealed. I stood there, chest-heaving knife clenched in my hand, surrounded by opaque glass walls that suddenly felt much thinner than they should have. That's when I noticed the shadows. At first, they were just faint smudges pressing against the milky surface of the privacy glass. Then more appeared, and more. Dozens. They were human silhouettes, standing inches away from the walls, perfectly still. I backed up until my spine hit the kitchen island. "What do you want?" I shouted. My voice echoed uselessly around the massive space. The answer came through the speakers in the ceiling, not a voice at first, but whispering. A low, layered murmur, like a crowd speaking just softly enough that you couldn't make out individual words. The tablet chimed again. The camera feeds were gone. In their place was a new message. "We've been watching you all night, Leo. You look better from the inside." Before I could react, the glass began to clear. The white haze faded slowly, deliberately, like a stage curtain lifting. And there they were. 30 people standing in a perfect circle around the house, illuminated by the red interior lights, bleeding through the glass. Every single one of them wore an identical white plastic mask, smooth, featureless, with empty black eye holes. They weren't holding weapons. They were holding signs. Happy New Year, the glittery borders read. And in the center, written in thick black letters, was a single word, replace. My legs felt hollow. I turned in a slow circle knife, trembling in my grip, surrounded by steel, marble, and glass, and by people who weren't trying to break in. They were waiting. The tablet chimed again. A file folder slid onto the screen. Subject Leo Marshall, Candidate 402. I didn't want to touch it. I touched it anyway. The screen filled with my life. Photos from high school. Bank statements. Medical records. Transcripts of conversations I'd forgotten I even had, including my FaceTime call with Sarah earlier that night, word for word. At the bottom of the screen was a progress bar. Current bid $450 000. Bidder guessed 1. I let out a broken laugh that turned into a sob. This isn't real, I whispered. This can't be real. The whispers stopped. A man's voice replaced them. Calm. Cultured. Empty. You're an excellent candidate, Leo, the voice said. Healthy. Socially replaceable. A flexible career. Minimal risk of detection. You're exactly what our clients look for at the end of the year. I'm not an object, I screamed, slamming my fist against the counter. I'm not something you buy. This isn't about ownership, the voice replied smoothly. It's about efficiency. Why improve when you can replace? The countdown ticked down. 000. 8. 17. The Aegis system has mapped everything. The voice continued. Your voice patterns. Your gait. Your digital footprint. At 1201 a.m. guessed, 1 will be Leo Marshall, and you will be the previous version. The masked figures outside began to move. Slowly. Stepping closer to the glass in perfect unison. The house is a cage, the voice said, but it's also a furnace. That's when the vents hissed. A sweet chemical smell flooded the air. My head went light instantly. The room stretched and blurred, the red light smearing into long streaks. They were sedating me. I dropped to one knee, fighting to stay conscious, clawing for air that didn't burn. No, I gasped. No, my hand slid across the counter and hit the tablet. Through my blurred vision, I noticed something new on the cracked screen. System emergency hard reboot. I remembered Dave's voice. Break the brain, not the sensors. I wasn't getting out of the house. But maybe I could kill it. I grabbed the metal carafe from the built-in espresso machine and smashed it into the control panel. Sparks flew. I twisted the water valve fully open. Water sprayed everywhere, onto the marble, into the outlets across the tablet dock. The voice sharpened. Stop! You'll damage the hardware. That's the idea, I slurred. I took the chef's knife and shoved it into the exposed wiring beneath the tablet. There was a blinding blue flash. A deafening crack. The entire house screamed an electronic shriek that tore through the speakers. Then everything went dark. The red lights died. The whispers vanished. The gas stopped. Silence. For one heartbeat, I thought I'd done it. Then the privacy glass cleared. They were right there, hands slapping against the panes, masks scraping the surface as they tried to get in. Somewhere, a door groaned open. Footsteps echoed on the stairs. I turned. A man stepped into the great room. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was wearing my clothes, my hoodie, my shoes. He held a syringe in one hand and my phone in the other. I didn't think. I ran. The sliding glass door to the balcony resisted, then shifted just enough. I squeezed through and vaulted over the railing, dropping 15 feet into deep snow. Pain exploded up my legs, but I rolled and staggered to my feet. Behind me, the glass house filled with white masks. I ran downhill toward the frozen lake, sliding, falling, running again. Boots crunched behind me, dozens of them, steady and patient. I crossed the ice and collapsed into a stand of trees on the far shore. At midnight, I heard no countdown. I heard an explosion. When I looked back, the glass house was a pillar of fire. They told the world it was an accident. A smart home malfunction. A house sitter killed in a blaze. Even Sarah wanted to believe that explanation. But 6 months later in Chicago, I saw a man across the street. My height, my walk, my face. He checked his watch, my watch smiled, and disappeared into the crowd. My life kept going. Bank accounts, posts, online, proof that I existed. But somewhere out there, a better version of me is living my life. And every time my phone buzzes, every time a smart device activates on its own, I know the system didn't die. It just found new glass to look through.